veterans benefits are Senator Tom Adder, you had the floor. Do you have any further questions or further comments?
Yes, sir. So that, Mr. Speaker, then I think I raised my concern, and so to address that concern, I would like to make the following amendment on page 2, and that is to strike paragraph B at line 33 through 36.
Okay. The ADA amendment is to strike paragraph B. Any senator wish to be heard on the ADA amendment? Any senator wish to be heard on the ADA amendment? Senator Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My concern with not having a cap on what could be piled on top of something else would lead me to wonder if, in fact, we're doing a disservice to the employees. I don't have any issue with upward mobility, and I think that in some ways this whole concept supports that idea of upward mobility. We understand that the Doc Sanchez scholarship is a very specific and narrow program, and that a lot of the people, and I recall in my days working with agencies, I knew of some people who were recipients of that, and I understood how they aspired, and I understood the sacrifices that they had to make. But I think that there has to be some level of consideration when you start to give bonus points for one thing or another. At some point, then you would assume that that it can't be so fair if you would allow everybody to take advantage of every credit. And what I want to speak to is specifically, if you were to consider the other types of points that are given to, for example, people with disabilities or veterans, for example, it would be contemplated that within their category, and in consideration of the service that they did in other aspects of their lives prior to employment with the government, that there are also some associated benefits that they receive. So in my opinion, with regard to that amendment, I think that it probably would not be fair. It could be argued that it's not fair to them, but I believe not giving them all the considerations and not narrowing it down as Section B recommends would, I just think it would be a disservice to the rest of them because they are receiving other credits and considerations aside from what is provided in this proposed language. So I would advocate for people getting some credit, but at some point there has to be some rationale and some reasonableness about how much you give, because otherwise you've really eliminated competition by giving too much favor to some employees. So I would probably not support that idea, and I would recommend that we just keep it in because there has to be some level of reasonableness to awarding extra points.
Thank you very much, Senator Torres. Senator Blast, I see your hand up also.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in consideration of the amendment that's being proffered, I think that, in reading the section here, the language of the section that is being proffered to be removed, if you go to line 35, starting at line 44, shall only be permitted to avail themselves of one type of credit provided either under this article or 4GCA. What is 4GCA 4104? That's the question. Well, I don't want to hold up the discussion on this thing more. I appreciate the author of the legislation, providing me the information, I can go ahead and look at this, then I make that determination as to whether or not I'm for or against the amendment. But I think it's
Do you
necessary
wish
to
some
be able
time
for
to-
us to understand what that is.
Okay. Do you wish some time to read 4104?
And maybe, you know,
All right,
because,
let's take a few
yeah,
minutes.
I think we should. Thank you.
Any other senator wish to be heard on the Tom Atta amendment to strike paragraph B? Is there an objection to the amendment? Hearing none. On the main motion, you may continue, Senator Atta.
That's it, Speaker. Thank you.
Senator Underwood, you're recognized on the main motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I had been a recipient of scholarship, and that was the teacher training scholarship that really helped me to start my career as an educator. And so I have an appreciation for scholarships and providing our students, our community members, especially those who are having a tough time financially, the opportunity for them to attain a degree and even to provide them the opportunity to have the experience in working while they are attaining their degree. And that is the power of the Doc Sanchez scholarship. In that, with this scholarship, the employees who are enrolled in the program are provided administrative leave with pay while they attend classes. And I think that's great because we provide those who are already working the opportunity to get a degree and to not only get the skills, but get a professional degree. So going back to my experience, I had started out with a teacher training program. And the benefit that I received from that was that I had to pay back by teaching, equivalent to the number of years that my schooling was funded by the government of Guam. So I appreciated that because that opened the door for me to get off food stamps and welfare and be a contributing member of the community and to be empowered to be a teacher and start my career as an educator. But with this bill, I really have a problem with this, in that the recipients of the scholarship, and this gives them additional points in the promotional, the opportunities to get promoted into a higher paying position. When I went for my graduate degree, I've had to pay my way. And I went off island. I had to pay my way. I didn't have a scholarship. I took my Government of Guam retirement out because I didn't have any other means. But luckily, I was able to, I was afforded a fellowship at the University of Oregon, and I was able to bring my kids with me and then come back. But when I came back, Mr. Speaker, I had to apply again. I wasn't given preferential position, but again, they believed enough in my abilities and the skills that I brought back with me that I was able to apply for another position within the Department of Education. Having gone through that, I experienced quite a bit of empowerment because I had worked to get my doctoral degree pretty much on my own. I had a student loan. My family helped to support me. And then I was, of course, in public assistance because I had 3 kids. But, you know, I was able to make it, and when I came back and I started to move up the ranks, it wasn't because I was given preferential treatment. It was because I competed, and it was because the government had seen my capacity to contribute to the department. So, you know, Mr. Speaker, if I were to have come back, and in this case, and tried to apply, and I wasn't part of the Pete Sanchez Professional Scholarship, then I would have been one of those that didn't have that extra points, you know, given to me. So I really would encourage us to rethink this, because personally, from my own personal experience, while it's a tough road, it's not impossible for our employees and for members of our community to improve their ranking and to improve themselves and to get promoted. Not because we give them extra points, but because they themselves know that they have the skills to compete with everyone else. And the basis for that promotion is really based on demonstrated capacity, their experience, and the skills that they have acquired. So in that sense, Mr. Speaker, I really oppose this, not because I don't believe in giving opportunities for our employees and members of our community, but because I believe that in their capacity to improve themselves and to move themselves up. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Underwood. Any other senator wish to be heard on the main motion? On the main motion. If not, Senator Uggan, you're...
Kind of inquiry. Remember, prior to the recess, I had asked the question that with the amendment that was adopted, my amendment, that we needed to ask legal counsel whether going back to A now and C, whether career employees of the government of Guam now would be the appropriate, term to use, starting off each one of those subsections, or allow legal counsel then basically to make it now conform to that amendment, because now these are applicants rather than just career employees of the government, because it now includes others coming into the government.
Has everybody received a copy of the WAMPAT amendment to correct what was done earlier? And I will allow this. I saw your hand go up, Senator Torres.
I just have a point of inquiry to the author of the amendment. As I understand the Doc Sanchez scholarship, the intent of the Doc Sanchez scholarship was to address career government employees who had the intention of staying employed within the government in the foreseeable future. And as I understand the intent of the legislation that created it, it was to provide for management positions and public administration opportunities for people within the government who were career employees. I believe it's an upward mobility incentive type of program. And so if we're going to delete career employees, are we then just sabotaging the intent of the whole scholarship fund? Because that's how I see it. If now you're not addressing career employees within the government, classified employees, then are we then just
But they would be
negating the whole
the
intention?
Wouldn't they be the only ones who would qualify for the scholarship? So they got the scholarship, they got the leave time, they got paid.
But if you eliminate the word career, then my impression is it isn't specific to that class of employee, just the whole scholarship program in general. The application is specifically to career employees of the government. So if we're now deleting career employees, are we also infringing on the spirit of the award of the scholarship to begin with? I'm going back to the genesis of the whole thing.
Is anybody able to yield to the question posed by Senator Torres? Does anybody need a minute to discuss this?
I can try. It is not restricted and to take it away from the career employees of the government, because we've just amended it to allow for those who are not career employees to now, who have the qualifications, who have the degree, so that they'll be able then to apply. So it doesn't take that away from them, because now that we've opened it for others who've returned to Guam, basically opens it now for others. So it's, when we say applicants, so those who are currently in the system, the career employees, are also applicants to apply for these managerial or supervisory positions. So it does not take that away from them, because if you don't remove that, then there's going to be that conflict for those outside of the government applying, because then they'll say, well, you can't do this now because you're not a career government of Guam employee. And that will be the very first thing to be challenged. No one would challenge the fact that those who are currently in the system are career employees, classified employees. And that's what I don't want, that once we've accepted that, that applicant now outside of the government, that they would now be discriminated against because they don't fall under that category of career employees of the government of Guam.
Thank you. Senator Torres?
I think what that does for me, thank you for that response, but then what that does to me is it leaves me with the impression that this is not even needed anymore. Because the legislation was specific to the Doc Sanchez scholarship recipients. It was a perk for the people that went through that application and went through that process. Now, if you're talking about credit for education, that sort of thing is almost a given that that education would be a qualification for the types of jobs that these recipients of the scholarship would be applying for, supervisory or some sort of a promotion. Generally, those types of jobs are left for people with that have a certain criteria or caliber, which would include education. Perhaps I'm wrong, and perhaps there are managers in the government that don't have college educations. Would that be? So then maybe that's it. I mean, I would think that those positions would require a certain qualification that is a given for anyone applying for that position, so no points needed. But I now actually just caught myself, and perhaps then I will withdraw that thought and acknowledge that sometimes the ideal is not the ideal circumstance. Thank you.
On the WANPAD amendment, it's in front of everybody, hopefully. Yes.
Yeah.
What A and B? Well, I'll take a short recess. amendment. Is there an objection?
Can you just clarify, the amendment now is just in paragraph A, right? Because B doesn't exist.
Correct. It becomes C. Because we removed B, it'll be what was C. The former C. Any senator wish to be heard on the amendment? Go ahead. Is there an objection? There is an objection. All those in favor of the amendment, please indicate by raising your hand. Amendment fails. On the main motion, any senator wish to be heard on the main motion? If not, I'll invite the sponsor to close. On the motion to send the bill down, any objection? Thank you. We'll just take a short recess.
Senator McCready, you're recognized on Bill 161.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to accept Bill 161-33 as substituted on the floor.
On the motion to accept, no objections, so ordered.
And I'd also like to make a motion to place in the third reading file and discuss.
You may proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 161-33 is a bill to establish the Guam Liberation Day fishing and sports events, and what I consider this is a starter bill. It's a starter bill to re-inspire, to reinvigorate our water sports here on Guam, and to make it a traditional Liberation Day festivities or Liberation Month festivities. Previously, we had the Guam Fishing Derby that was held, and it wasn't really a Liberation Day tradition. It was just a fishing derby that fishermen would register and go out and fish for 2 days, and then come back and win or lose and have a barbecue at the end of the events. What this bill hopes to accomplish is to not just make it one fishing derby. We would like to see if we can make this a tourist attraction, a family attraction, and something that we really never had before. We'd like to add jet ski races, canoe paddling races, fishing derbies, diving, mother and father and son, family fishing events along the shore. All these things that at the same time we're having as Guam families during Liberation Day, we can also include tourists if they're interested. And I just had one of the longtime presidents of the Fishermen Co-op, I think 20 years, and he's very excited about the possibility of having these sporting events happen during Liberation Day. And I think it's very important that we continue to keep those traditions alive. So, Madam Speaker, The bill's pretty straightforward. It does have a $35,000 appropriation from the Guam Visitors Bureau, and there was no objections for this bill at the public hearing from GVB. So I hope that my colleagues can read through this bill and start a new tradition here on Guam through water sports and through our tradition at Liberation Day festivities. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. On the motion, is anyone who'd like to speak on the motion? There being none, so then on the motion to send 161 as substituted on the floor to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered. Thank you, Senator. Bill number 190-33, Senator Rodriguez, you recognize.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 190-33 as substituted by the Committee on Health, Economic Development, Homeland Security, and Senior Citizens on the third reading and be allowed to briefly discuss what it's about.
It says as substituted. Can everyone please make sure then that, and I'm looking for my copy as well, as substituted.
Yeah, I don't have it.
We're going to take a brief recess to make sure everyone has their copy. Senator, you may continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 191. Bill 91 is relative to requiring the National Clinical Mental Health Counselor exams be the sole requisite exam for licensure for licensed mental health counselors. And also, it is relative to establishing a licensed intern designation during the 3,000-hour postgraduate clinical experience period required for mental health professional licensure. And it also provides for a grandfather provision so that whatever changes are made ensures that those who will qualify for that grandfather provision are indeed addressed by this change. This is at the request of the Association of Individual Marriage and Family Therapists of Guam. Of course, Madam Speaker, they're requesting that we amend the requirement for both exams for licensed mental health counselor, and that only the National Clinical Mental Health Counselor exam be required, but not the NCE, which stands for the National Counselor Examination. And there was a law from last legislative term that required the two requirements, but after consultation with them, it's their recommendation that just one of these exams be required for licensure. The second part of this bill, Madam Speaker, establishes an intern license designation for qualified persons pursuing education and career as an individual marriage and family therapist, a certified professional counselor, licensed clinical social worker, licensed mental health counselor, licensed professional counselor, or marriage and family therapist. This limited license designation is as a mental health care intern would only be applicable during the postgraduate period and the accumulation of the requisite 3,000 hours of clinical experience, and would allow for billable hours for services rendered during this period. And so we've worked with Mr. Wayne Butler, who is the representative of the association. He is the representative that works with the legislature, and so we're asking that this measure be supported and then move forward in this legislative session, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
On the motion, Senator Frank Blas Jr., you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just a point of page 3, line 23. The last sentence there, to be legible for the intern.
Okay, yes, Senator. To be eligible. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
I hope they know how to write, but
maybe it might
just
be
know
legible.
that they need to be
You know,
eligible.
whether they can read. Is it legible?
Yeah. So I know how. They better know how to
Okay.
write. Just be
You
eligible.
want to send it back to the committee?
Okay.
Okay, so that correction then will be made. No objection, so ordered. Thank you, Senator. Is there anybody else? Taza, Azi Malago Comentus, Togi, Consigi, Senor Blas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I look at this and if the author could yield to the question, basically, I'm starting this from line on page 2,
Page
line
2.
14. The requisite 3,000 hours of clinical experience, is that standard?
Senator, do you yield to the question? Yes, Madam Speaker. To my knowledge, yes, it is. That's, really this is a piece of legislation that we've worked with the association, and in discussion with them, I've took it that, yes, this is a standard amount.
Okay, Senator, was he able to answer your question?
That actually leads to more questions with regards to I'm just trying to do the quick math in my head with regards to the 18 months on the grandfather provision found on page 5, section 14. Is there any correlation with the 3,000 hours and the 18 months?
Yes, Senator. Can we just quickly take a brief recess?
Please.
Are you okay? Senator, I know we had left with a question from Senator Bloss, and it was working with you, Senator, the chairperson and author of this bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If we can just set it aside and we'll get the answers to the questions and we'll come back to it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so it'll be set aside. Bill number 232, Senator McCready, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make a motion to place Bill 232-33.
Pass.
Excuse me, hold on.
As amended. Can you please?
Okay. Sorry. Okay, I have it here. I'd like to make a motion to place Bill 232-33 as amended by the Committee on Finance, Taxation, General Government Operations, and Youth Development into the third reading file and discuss.
Okay, one of the senators had indicated that she didn't get a copy. Can you please, everyone please double check? It's as amended? Okay, so, all right, so the senator then to discuss, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 232 is a bill that amends Chapter 74108 of Chapter 74, Title 11, Guam Code annotated relative to increasing the civil penalties for scrap metal businesses who fail to properly follow reporting requirements as per Guam law, and to amend subsection of the 77-135 Article 1, Chapter 77, Title 10, Guam Code annotated relative to the deposit of any fines imposed on scrap metal businesses in the Police Services Fund. So, Madam Speaker, we all know that there is a problem with stolen scrap metal being sold and then being either resold or taken off island to be sold. You know, so I mean, you look at the crime, right? And the recent crime was the newly renovated Teetson softball field. When the criminals, I can only imagine, waited for the copper wire to be fixed after, I think, 10 years. It was 10 years before they had lights. Waited for the copper wire to be fixed. And then they stole the copper wire, and it cost us about $50,000. That's just one incident. And so that's the first crime. The second crime is buying stolen copper wire. I mean, when you steal $50,000 worth of brand new copper wire, Madam Speaker, I'm not a detective, I'm not a police officer, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that's probably stolen. You commit the second crime. And the third crime is what that person who bought the stolen copper wire does with it after he or she gets it. So there's three crimes basically being committed. And I think we have addressed the issue of stolen copper wire to an extent, but this right here is a starting point that should help end it. And we looked at our research, and basically what we did was we took some federal mandates, and we just went along federal guidelines and how they implement fines and regulations. So, on the civil penalties on line 2, each violation of the requirements of this chapter shall be punishable upon conviction by a fine of not less than $100,000 and the permanent revocation of a scrap metal business license. So, Madam Speaker, this is basically one and done. If you're going to steal copper wire from our island and our communities, whether they're sports communities or government communities. I also heard that they stole copper wire from the FESPAC developments down at Paseo Stadium, which would have been the most recent. I know I said the Teetson was the most recent, but I think the most recent was the FESPAC copper wire theft. So that's where we stand. I think we have to fight fire with fire when it comes to these individuals or companies, and we have to make sure that this does not happen, because what in turn what happens, Madam Speaker, is we end up paying for it. The government ends up paying for it, and we end up coming short. I have a spreadsheet on the amounts of copper wire that has been stolen throughout the last couple of years. In 2013, we had $91,031 in copper wire thefts. In 2014, we had $160,614, and in 2015, the number went to $100,360, at a total of $352,000 and some change. I would expect there may be a downward trajectory in copper wire thefts because there's no more copper wire to steal. They stole it all. What they're doing is they're just waiting for it to be built. They're waiting for the infrastructure to be put up, and then they steal it as soon as it's complete. So I really hope that we can come together on this. There's also some more totals. In 2013, we had 23 total copper wire thefts. In 2014, we had 82. And like I said, it's going down because in 2015, we had 47 with a total of 152. So hopefully we can get this number. My goal would be to get the number down to 0. But if you know this law exists and you're still willing to buy the stolen copper wire, then something is wrong with the person who's buying it, because you're not going to have a license anymore and you're going to be fined $100,000. So if by doing this we help eliminate the market to buy copper wire entirely, Madam Speaker. So I thank you for letting me speak on the bill, and I'll answer any questions. I'll give away my cheat sheets and my talking points, but I hope my colleagues can agree that this is something that has to be addressed and stopped immediately. Thank you.
Welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator Uggan, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, first of all, I stand in support of the intent of the legislation, and I thank the sponsor for looking at depositing any of the fines that are assessed into the Police Services Fund, because I'm sure that he recognizes that the Guam Police Department can always utilize some of these resources to be able to address their vehicle maintenance as well as the equipment needs. My question, Madam Speaker, is really in reference to subsection 74108, just so that I can get a clarification as to what the impact is going to be. Because I read on page 2, it says line 5 through 7, or let me just read the whole thing. Line 4 through 8, it says, it is the intent of the legislature in Guam to amend this section to increase the civil penalties for scrap metal businesses who fail to comply with reporting requirements, and amend the subsequent section to deposit the fines for such civil penalties in the Police Services Fund. Now, receiving stolen property, I understand. Imposing a criminal penalty, imposing a $100,000 fine, shutting down your business if you knowingly receive these stolen items. But trying to match Section 2 with the statement on line 6 where let me repeat it again, to increase the civil penalties for scrap metal businesses who fail to comply with reporting requirements. So we're saying that business A, if you do not report the receipt of any scrap metal or copper, you will be fined $100,000 first shot and your business license automatically taken away. That's really the question I have in reference to whether, in fact, that's the intent of the sponsor, or are we looking at if you knowingly receive stolen materials, then that's a criminal act. Then it could lead to $100,000 fine plus rescinding your business license. And from that perspective, I totally agree with that. So, Madam Speaker, I apologize if the sponsor could respond to that inquiry.
Sure,
Senator,
sure.
do you yield to the question?
Yes, I do, and thank you, Senator Uggan, for the question and the clarification. My intent, Madam Speaker, and I can only assume, maybe that's not the best word to use right now, but I can only assume that each business, when it deals with various metals, knows the law. They should know the law better than we do, because they're in that market. They know that there is epidemic of copper wire theft on Guam. So it's not as if you're just going to take a business owner who is naive to the process. These individuals know what the process is. So when I look at it, and I hope this answers the question, when I look at it, I think that it's not that we're punishing a business who didn't know the law, but if you were not going to report the copper wire purchase, for what reason why you wouldn't? That would be my question. Why would you not report a copper wire purchase if you know that's the law? And so, I mean, it just doesn't go through copper wire. It goes through just ferrous metals in general. If there's a reporting requirement, and now you know, and that's why I said earlier in my statement, if you know the law now, and you know the penalty for the law of buying copper wire, and you know the penalty for not reporting the law, then I do believe that it's suffice to impose this. I hope that answers the question to the proffer of it.
Thank you very much to the good senator and Mr. Speaker. I thank him for responding. And like I shared a little earlier, in terms of depositing any of these fines to the Guam Police Services funds, I'm very appreciative of that. In this particular case, I would think that if a business knowingly, and that's why I tried to make sure that I was as clear as possible, knowingly receives scrap metal and does not report it, then assessing this level of fines is very appropriate.
It's not the issue of reporting. There are requirements when you're buying copper wire. You're supposed to take a copy of the driver's license, and you're supposed to ask where that person came from, where it came from. And so that's what's not being... That's what it is. The problem is that many of these companies just pretend, buy the copper wire without getting the license number, the card number, the driver's license of the person, so that you know who it was that stole it. And that's, I believe that was Senator Palacios' amendment a few years back.
Okay, thank you very much to the second sponsor of the legislation. I want to thank you for the clarification, Mr. Speaker. But like I shared with you, Mr. Speaker, the reporting requirement is certainly a very critical part of catching these thieves. And if they're not being properly reported, the fines, assessing a fine certainly is appropriate. It was just looking at, okay, a report versus a conviction that, in fact, you knowingly received these items and they were not properly purchased, so to speak, or acquired. So thank you very much, or legally purchased or acquired. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. On the main motion, any other senator wish to be heard? Madam Speaker, do I understand you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have, no objections to some of the bill itself and what it speaks to, and how, of course, the ultimate goal is to reduce, the loss of copper wires per se in, let's say, our schools, for that matter. One real good example was in the closure of F.Q. Sanchez, not even months later, when it was turned over, when the governor turned it over to the community, the entire wiring of that school was stolen. And so it remained closed because they then didn't have the money to be able to purchase these wires and then pay someone to come in and rewire again the whole school. That has happened many times as well in other schools. So I kind of smiled when I saw that the penalty here has been increased from 1,000 to 100,000, and many times we always try to find ways to be able to support our men and women in the police department. And I know that there is this special account that they have, the Police Services Fund, where we want the monies to go in there like all other funds, and then have this legislature appropriate it out to the operations for that particular department and agency. But it still does not address the schools who have suffered or the agencies that have suffered where their copper wires have been stolen and they're left not just not having the copper wires, but then maybe not being able to function, not having the money within their budget to replace, the copper wires and others have been stolen. So I think what should actually happen here, and I'm having legal counsel work on the amendment, is that the cost of those copper wires that has to be replaced, that the replacement first be the monies that it actually goes back to that department then to be able to replace these copper wires that have been stolen, and that the remainder then will go to the police services fund. I know the author of this bill hasn't heard what I just said. Oh, you're fine with it? So I'm getting the amendment. It's being typed right now, so can I please come back to it?
We'll take a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Copies of the amendments that I spoke about earlier has been passed out to everyone, and if I may, it's that it's going to be in page 2, which is subsection A of section 3. So it's 3A, starting with the lines 23, but not necessarily that that's all being deposited, being amended, but just to have it flow well in terms of what I described will be best for me if I may read it. Is that the chief of police may prescribe, in accordance with administrative adjudication law, fees to be charged and collected by the department that are directly related to the need of the agency to recover administrative costs in servicing the public. These fees and fines imposed under Section 74108 of Chapter 74, Title 11, Guam Code annotated. The new amendment is less the amounts deposited into the Copper Victims Fund pursuant to subsection B, which is further down, because we're saying that's where we want the money to be deposited in a special, shall be deposited in a special account known as the Police Services Fund, established separate and apart from the general fund. So the new thing is, when you go now to subsection B, which we're saying will be deposited into the Copper Victims Fund, is that an amount equivalent to the value of the stolen copper wire as determined by the Attorney General of Guam shall be deposited into a special account known as the Copper Victims Fund, established separate and apart from the general fund to be administered by the Attorney General for the benefit of the victims of copper theft. These funds, once appropriated to the department, are not subject to the transfer authority of the governor. So that's my amendment.
On this WAMPAT amendment, any senator wish to be heard on this proffered WAMPAT amendment? Any objection? Thank you,
very
Madam
much.
Speaker. On the main motion, any other senator wish to be heard on the main motion? If not, I'll invite on the motion to send the bill down. Any objection?
Bill number 263-33 LS, Senator Tom Atta, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I move to place Bill 263-33 LS as amended by the Committee on Transportation, Infrastructure, Lands, Border Protection, Veterans Affairs, and Procurement. And I would like to, discuss it.
Okay, so on that motion then to place on third with discussion, Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, Bill 263 really is a real simple bill, and essentially what it does is it makes a technical correction to an authorization that was made in an earlier bill, and what it does is it just changes the dimensions of the area that is being authorized to be sold to the adjacent landowner, changing it from 58.5 square meters to 73 square meters. So that really is the extent of what the bill does. That's it.
On the motions, anyone like to speak? You would have 73 seconds to speak on it. Yes, per square meter. So,
Thank you very much. I just urge my colleagues to go ahead and support the bill. Thank you very much.
you're very welcome. So on the motion then to send, let me get the right number. Bill number 263-33 as amended to third reading file without any objection, so ordered. Thank you, Senator. Bill number 284-33, Senator Respicio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill 284-33, which is an act to amend certain sections of the code regarding the notice requirement for the sale of used tires. I move that this be in the third reading file. I move to place it in the third reading file.
Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam
Any
Speaker. I
discussions?
want to follow in the footsteps of the previous speaker to just urge my colleagues to go ahead and vote for this bill too. And so this bill really seeks a clarification in current law, and there's nothing that we're doing to change the intent of the current law, only to make a technical correction through statute. We amended one part of the law to make it so that used tires will be available for up to 10 years. And there was another section of the law that we, regarding notices, that we should have also changed from 6 years to 10 years. So to clarify the current statute, I'm offering this bill, and I encourage my colleagues to support this bill as well.
On the motion, is there anyone who'd like to speak on the main motion? There being none, so are you sure now there's nobody else who wants to speak? Okay, see, I told you. Senator Torres, you're recognized.
To the author, I'd just like to get clarification.
1 second, he just stepped out. He just ran out. Oh, there he is. Okay, go ahead. You may proceed.
To the author, I'd like to seek some clarification in changing the age of the used tires from 6 years to 10 years, where it states on line 15, or starting with line 14, tires deteriorated with age, even with little or no use. Tires older than 10 years may not be sold or mounted for use on vehicles. Does this also contemplate cars that are hobby cars or collector cars, or historically, collectible items that are in the vintage or classic line? Does this contemplate that those now become illegal? Just please clarify.
Senator, do you yield to the question? Ungan?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. If I understand correctly,
Okay.
if it's a 1940 vintage vehicle and their tires were also around 1940, would those tires be permitted to stay on those cars? I think what we're doing is specific to the actual age of the tire and not necessarily the vehicle. Previous legislatures ago, there was a statute that limited the number of years that a used tire can be on a vehicle to 6 years, but because of updates to the kinds of qualities that surrounding the manufacturing of tires, nationwide, it's statistically proven that the lifespan of a tire can go for as much as 10 years, and so we moved to update the statute to reflect current technologies. And so I think the answer to the question is, if the car wants to be in operation, then it has to comply with all the the vehicle codes with respect to safety and standards. And so if it's a 1940 vehicle with a 1940 tire attached to it, then certainly it would not be permissible to be in operation if that car wants to be on the road. What has happened is we've heard from the Automobile Tires Association, where a lot of people bring in their cars for a flat, and the tire generally is in still good condition. The threading is still in good condition, but because the tire is 6 years and older and under 10 years, these tire repair shops were confiscating that tire, and these individuals had to purchase new tires for their car. And so when we moved to change the statute, there was another section where we also had to change with respect to notices. So I guess I would submit to the body as an answer to the question is if that vehicle wants to be in operation, then they have to comply with all the legal standards in order for that vehicle to be operating safely on the roads.
Senator, was he able to respond to your inquiry? Okay. On the main motion, is there anybody else then now who would like to speak? 1, 2, 3. Mr. Vice Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I don't have the hobby myself of collecting vintage cars, but I have seen some of them on the road, and I'm not sure if they're utilizing recently manufactured tires, or whether or not to try to comply with the vintage of the car, that it would be from that period. And I'm just wondering if that would mean that that car could no longer go on the road, and whether or not some of the car collectors on this island were made aware of this issue that could possibly deny them the ability to go on the road. I mean, everything else is working on the car, the engine, and all the other parts, and it's now just going to be the tires that are going to keep them off the road. I mean, they're utilizing engines from the 40s and the 30s, but they can't use the original tires of the car, even if the car had been in storage for the last 30 years. I saw that on one of the sales in the States, there was a whole barn full of cars that hadn't been driven, the person that collected them, and people were flocking to go buy these vintage cars from the 50s and the 40s. The tires on them would probably be in better condition than my car, and I replaced the tire last year, but the roads here have taken its toll, and I'm just wondering whether or not, if one of our constituents in this community had the wherewithal to be able to buy one of those, a 50s Thunderbird, whether or not they'd be able to drive that when they got it back here, because it had the original tires from when it was in 1950. I just posed that question.
Senator Respicio, since you posed the question, is there you have an opportunity to provide any comments or?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. At the time there was a discussion on this law, and it was made to our attention that when they tried to implement this law, there was some ambiguity that one section of the law would increase the life of a tire from 6 years to 10 years, and then when then the law that requires the notice requirement still said 6 years. The attorneys didn't know how to implement this, and so we wanted to seek clarity. That issue of if a vintage or if an antique vehicle can run antique tires, it never came up. I think it's a valid concern, but really my common sense thinking tells me, do we really want to have vehicles with tires on that car that's longer than 10 years? The case already as it is for the longest time, at least in the last decade, you could not have a tire attached to your vehicle that's older than 6 years. And the genesis of this change in law actually came from the Automobile Tires Association, where they were seeing that these were companies that are set up to repair flat tires, and they've seen a lot of particularly mom and pop cars where they're not driving these cars every day, and so when they get a flat and they pull in to have their tire repaired, the tire could be 7 or 8 years or certainly under 10 years, and they've been confiscating those tires and having consumers purchase new tires on the vehicle. And so they came forward and said, because of new changes in how tires are manufactured, that it's very well that you can have a tire for at least a minimum of, at least a maximum of 10 years. And so whatever vintage vehicle is on the road right now, they couldn't, for the very long time, they couldn't be in operation on the road if their tires were longer than 6 years or under than 10 years. So it's one of those things where we're moving to correct an earlier law, and this correction will make it clear that along with extending the shelf life for these tires and the uses of these tires, we're also making the notice requirement match that, which is 10 years. And so the concern raised by our colleagues that what happens in the case of a car that is in operation and their tires are longer than 10 years, imagine if they ever had a flat tire and had to get their tires repaired. If it's more than 10 years old, those tires would have to be confiscated because it doesn't comply with the current statute.
So, Mr. Vice Speaker, hopefully then with that discussion be able to answer some of your questions. On the motion, Senator Frank Blas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm still a little confused here. It appears that this is a notice requirement for the sale of used tires, and I appreciate the what the author had provided. However, I don't see here where it basically says that if the repair shop recognizes that the tire is more than 10 years, that it has to be confiscated. That's in another section? Okay, well, you know, I mean, I just needed to see how that fit with this here. Because and we're only talking about aged tires. But the title says used tires. So you can have tires in your inventory for more than 10 years that have never been used. Does that, is that the same requirement here, or?
Senator, do you yield to the question?
I do, Madam Speaker, and I thank the Senator for the question. That's the concerns that he's raising is another section of the current statute. If you look at every tire, there's the birth date of that particular tire that will determine when that tire was manufactured. And so, as I pointed out, several legislatures ago, there was a local law that made a prohibition against having vehicles have tires on those vehicles for longer than 6 years. And so when we moved to extend that from 6 years to 10 years for automobile tires, there's another section of law where we didn't adjust the notice requirement. And so that's what I'm attempting to do here. I'm gonna pull up the Title 16, which would point out the other concerns that are being raised currently by the previous speaker, that there's one section where you can have tires on your vehicle for more than 10 years. It was 6 years, now it's 10 years. And this is something that Rev and Tax doesn't enforce, so obviously, because when you go to do your vehicle inspection, they don't look at the age of your tires, and this is only enforced in the event that tire has to be fixed.
Josh, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, I point out to, this says, the title says, amend the notice requirement for the sale of used tires. But then, again, I bring up the point here that it's used, it says used tires. But then the body here, it appears as if it's going to be any tire that's more than 10 years of age. So I don't have a problem. It's just that I need to make sure that the title of the legislation fits the body of it. Because there's a difference between a used tire that's 10 years old and a new tire that's been sitting in inventory for the last 20 years. Can we take a recess?
We'll take a brief recess. session. Senator Respicio, and some of the concerns by colleagues. I understand
Yeah.
you have.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, since this bill specifically deals with the section in current statute that would make the notice requirement consistent with current statute that provides for tires to provide the sale of tires older than 10 years for the use on vehicles operated on the highways and roadways of Guam. And then the previous speaker rose to a concern, and a valid concern, where he says there's nothing in this bill that talks about tire people who sell tires confiscating the tires if it's older than the 10-year requirement. In the same statute, under penalties, it says any person who knowingly sells a tire or mounts a tire on a vehicle in violation of 3219 of this chapter commits a third-degree felony. That's why the scenario I used, which was happening prior to us amending the current statute to take us from 6 years to 10 years, when an individual goes in to repair a flat tire, what the tire, the company that sells tires, they would look at the date of the tire, even if the tire is repairable, even if the threading in the tire is still good and not worn out, they would have to tell that consumer, I'm sorry, because of the law, we have to confiscate the tire and you have to purchase new tires. And so I imagine the Automobile Tires Association, as an association, very honorably stepped forward and said, you know, we don't want to be doing this to customers when there's been changes in technologies and nationwide. It's been statistically proven that tires can last for 10 years as opposed to 6 years, which is why that law was amended. And so I submit this bill, which also corrects another section of the law to make it so that it's the 6-year requirement is also adjusted to 10 years. And in response to the previous speaker's concern, I moved that we authorize the legal counsel to change the title. Instead of saying notice requirement for the sale of used tires, it really should be notice requirement for the sale of tires. And that would cover new tires, used tires, and it would make it so that no tire could be mounted on a vehicle that's older than 10 years.
So you just don't want to make that amendment right now in the title?
I'll make the amendment then, ma'am.
Okay,
So I
can you
move to take out the word used,
Used.
in the title.
On that amendment on the title to delete the word used, and it would just be sale of tires. No objections, so ordered.
And in response to the concerns raised by two of our other colleagues regarding a vintage vehicle and can that vehicle still be operating on Guam's roads if the tire is older than 10 years, the response is manufacturers are making new tires to look like vintage tires, and so that's really not a concern surrounding this bill or any other matter, because those tires are made to look vintage and antique. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for all the concerns raised regarding this bill, and I hope that now we can move forward and I could have enough support for this bill to pass in the voting file. Thank you.
You're welcome. And on that motion, of course, that the senator had indicated that to allow legal counsel then to make sure that the body is reflective of the title. No objection, so ordered. And on the motion then to send 284-33 to the third reading file without any objection, so ordered. Bill number 287, Senator Respicio, you recognize.
Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 287-33 in a third reading file. Some discussion.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this bill is an act to establish the Southern River Erosion Council and to mandate the creation of a multi-year master plans to address the erosion issues related to the rivers in southern Guam. And I want to thank our colleagues that joined us on the tour to see exactly what's happening in the southern areas of our island with respect to erosion. And so after that tour that we had, that was facilitated by the Southern Soil and Water Conservation District Board and Dave Tidinko and the Kloppingbergs, which had us have a first-hand look at what's been happening with the jungle riverboat cruise and how a lot of the lands in those areas have been victims of the erosion. And so after that tour that we had several roundtable discussions where we brought together both the federal and local stakeholders and community representatives. And what we've discovered, Madam Speaker, as a committee is that this government is really doing a lot by way of, for example, the Department of Agriculture's Forestry Division has planted thousands of trees to do tree reforestation. The Environmental Protection Agency has received federal grants. Bureau of Statistics and Plans also has federal grants. And so we've seen many different components. We had private individuals such as new Dr. Austin Shelton that did his doctoral paper and his research that dealt with the mitigation of the erosion and the prevention of silt into the waters. And so we discovered, Madam Speaker, as a committee that there are all these different things happening, but what they were very honest about was that there was no real structure by way of something done by statute to mandate that these guys meet regularly and to have one plan going forward. And so these partners include the University of Guam, the Bureau of Plans and Statistics, the Guam Waterworks Authority, EPA, Public Works, the Southern Guam Soil and Water Conservation District, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which would be invited by invitation, and every single mayor of all the southern villages, the village of Agat, Umatic, Inarajan, Santa Rita, Talofofo, Maritzo, and Jonya. And while we convened this tour to just look at what could be done with respect to the Talofofo River and the Ugam River, the Santa Rita mayor expressed concern that the Namo River is also subject to erosion in that area, and they've already lost 4 homes. And so we decided to expand this bill to not only include the Namo River, but also any other river in southern Guam experienced serious erosion. And so this council, this Southern River Erosion Council, will put all their ideas together, all their mitigation efforts together. And the good thing about this idea, Madam Speaker, is that when the task force develops, whatever they develop, it has to be incorporated into the Southern Master Plan, specific master plans for the mitigation of the erosion problems along the Talofofo and Ugam rivers, the Namo River, and other rivers in southern Guam based on the recommendation from the Southern River Soil Erosion Council. So you're not going to see a task force that's going to meet to develop all these ideas and then have to appeal to the council that's supposed to do the Southern Development Master Plan, that whatever this council comes up with, it'll automatically be incorporated into this this effort. So I submit this to the body for its consideration. I want to recognize and thank Senator Torres for being a co-sponsor, and also Senator Tamata, whose committee this bill was referred to. He had a public hearing and continued to further this much important and much needed conversation in which how are we going to address the erosion of our southern areas. And so thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. So on the motion to send 287 to the third reading file, I'm sorry, you got something else?
Yeah, and if and I was going to save this for my closing, but my first amendment is on line 2 of page 4.
Wait.
It simply corrects, it's the Bureau of Statistics and Plans. So instead of the Bureau of Plans it would be the Bureau of Statistics and Plans. So that was my first amendment.
What page?
Page 4 of line 2.
Page 4, line 2, Bureau of Statistics and Plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so on that amendment, no objection, so ordered.
And then the other one, also on page 4, Madam Speaker, after line 20, to add the following, the Bureau of Statistics and Plans.
Okay, and to add then after,
As a member?
wait, on page 4, line 20? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So
Wait.
that one, yeah.
Wait, page 4, line 20,
Oh, it's not here.
that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I
Adding-
guess it's to add, not this one, to add the Department of Land Management as a member of this task force.
On what line? Where it says 14, then you want to add,
No, but look at this.
along with everybody there, you want to add
Line page 4, and then this
Department
is page 4,
of-
line 20. This shouldn't have been this. This should have been Department of Land Management. Yeah. So my second amendment is on page 4 after line 20 to add the Department of Land Management.
Okay, but
j-
Senator, can you please read that because it doesn't make sense to me at least. Is that after line 20 it ends with serious erosion problems?
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess a new line 6 after the Department of Public Works, just to add the Department of Land Management, so
Okay.
that and I agree with you, Madam Speaker. It's how the floor amendment was prepared. So
All right, so you're right. Okay, so we would add then a new, put that on line 6 and everything else will move down.
yes, thank you.
Okay, and that's to add Department of Land Management. No objection, so ordered.
Okay, and then my last amendment on line 1 of page 2, after the word navigable, add in and causing destruction to near shore benthic habitats.
Wait,
habitats.
page 2,
Yeah, habitats.
page 2, line
Line 1.
Line
of-
1, ongoing erosion is
After the word
adversely,
navigable.
adversely affecting the water quality of both rivers
Yeah.
and,
Less navigable and include the words and causing destruction to near shore benthic habitats.
causing, I'm sorry, I need to make sure I get that correctly for legal counsel and the clerks.
Yeah.
And
causing destruction
destruction
to near
to
NEAR near shore
shore.
benthic BNTHIC habitats.
Okay, so,
I'll just add in
so can you please make sure that the clerk will be able to get that? On that particular amendment, is there any objection? No objection?
yeah, and
Wait, okay,
Oh.
yeah, before I gather, that you're,
yeah,
nothing
and then
else?
finally
Wait, on that specific amendment, you're gonna add on?
No, I'm
Oh,
good
okay.
with- yeah.
So let me take that out of the way then. So on the amendment on page 2, line 1, after the word "and" is to add the words causing destruction to near shore something. Ventures?
benthic
Huh?
near shore benthic habitats.
Vintage?
Benthic BNTHIC.
DNT. Okay, well, I got to get that from you. Habitats, okay. On that, no objection? Thank you, so ordered.
And then
Is there-
finally, Madam Speaker, on line on page 1, line 4, after the words the Namo River, to add the Menengan River.
I was just going to ask you that. Thank you for remembering.
Yeah,
So,
something
because I
that
was going to
Senator
say, Jonah
Tom
is
Adler
still
brought
part
up.
of the South, so, okay, so to add, on page 1, line 4, after Namu River, to add Menengan River. On that amendment, no objection, so ordered.
And since that passed, on page 2, line 13, again after the Namo River, to insert the Menengan River.
Okay, so actually maybe what,
Yeah.
a general one, because
Yeah.
there are other sections,
Yeah,
like
so we
even on
don't-
page 3.
Okay, so we don't miss anything. I move that the legal counsel be authorized to to amend this to also include the Menengan River
Yes,
and to make all those changes throughout the bill.
thank you, Senator. So on that,
And I'll work with her
amendment?
at that.
no objection, so ordered.
Okay, thank you,
you.
Madam Speaker. Thanks.
Okay, Senator, on the main motion, Senator Blas?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in full support of this piece of legislation, and I need to also make sure that it's recognized that the author of this legislation, as well as the individual that was charged of this, really took to heart and really put together a series of not just field trips but meetings to be bringing in the subject matter experts and to identify subject matter experts to be able to do this. I think this piece of legislation actually continues to bring those individuals together, and so that in some cases, while we need to react to concerns with regards to some erosion, it also gives us the mechanism and the means to be able to be proactive with some of the rivers as development continues in these areas. I want to thank the author too for allowing me to join them in a couple of their field trips, if you will, to be able to see firsthand the erosion that is occurring. I took this to light, and I appreciate this because back in the 31st Guam Legislature, I actually authored legislation that permitted, that authorized and look into developing the Talafulful River for agriculture and aquaculture purposes. And quite honestly, that won't be able to happen until we're able to address the erosion that is occurring. And so I applaud him, and he's not going to stand and take the credit. We need to give him the credit. I appreciate again him putting everybody together, and the kind of work that they started, and the kind of work that would be continued. Once I'm very confident that this legislation will pass, and that it will become law. So thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. So on the motion to send 287 to third reading file without any objection. Oh, Senator Torres, you do have a comment? Oh, okay, yes, Senator.
Madam Speaker, I just want to rise in support of this. Obviously, I'm a co-sponsor, but I wanted to acknowledge the foresight and the critical thinking that went into the construction of this legislation. As the prior speaker mentioned, there were a series of meetings held, but I want to especially applaud the vision of the main author of this legislation, because what he did is he not only opened our eyes collectively to a problem, but he also highlighted a true asset that we have on our island in as far as the river systems and how they truly affect the livelihood of this island, right down to the water quality of our drinking water. And one thing that I find very inspiring about this, it seems like it's a very large group that would go into this council, but what this will do is it'll also force attention to the council from the community. And one of the, I just want to mention in passing how sometimes the legislation really has an impact, far-reaching, and that will go, that will have far-reaching impact over time. When we initially did the tour, which the co-sponsor was so gracious to invite his colleagues to attend, it inspired me to bring my grandchildren on the tour over Christmas break. And what that did when I saw them is they were not only entertained by the natural environment, but they were naturally curious, especially when we pointed out, little things that they had to be concerned with and why it was so important for them to protect it so that they could continue to enjoy the things like the fish and the crabs that were displayed to us and all the wildlife that lives there naturally. So I look forward to the passage of this bill, but I also look forward to a trend that we're going to set on this island, a trend that will hopefully fold into other things. We've had the Fisheries Council passed by this body, which was the first of its kind. We now have this problem approach to this collaborative approach to a problem in the form of this erosion council. But what I'm very happy about is it involves the leaders at the community level who will then reach out and inspire people within the community and generations within the community to not only address the problem, but more so to celebrate and protect a great and invaluable asset that we have on our island. So thank you to the co-sponsor for his vision and his leadership in putting this together. Sus Maasi.
You're welcome, Senator. Senator Respicio, what to close?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. I just rise to thank all of our colleagues for their help with this legislation. And I also want to add Senator Tom Matta and Frank Blas Jr. to the list of co-sponsors.
On that amendment, no objection, so ordered.
Thank you, everybody.
Senators. On the motion to send 287 to third reading file without any objections, so ordered. Senator Tom Matta on 290. Senator?
Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 290-33 COR as amended by the author.
And you want to speak on it?
And I would like to speak on it. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
you may proceed.
Madam Speaker, what Bill 290-33 does is it has identified some property at the top of the hill in Erosion, which the Erosion mayor and the municipal planning council would like to develop for public facilities that the village of Malolo and Erosion can use. Now, there's a possibility that they may be able to get federal grants from from GURA, and but in order to be able to even get in to become considered for any kind of a grant, the grantee must have site control of the property upon which the facility will be built on using GURA funds. And the way to do that, to provide them then with site control, would be to place the property in question under the administrative jurisdiction of the Erosion mayor. Now, the area that is being proposed to be turned over under the administrative jurisdiction of the mayor, currently there's located on there the Senior Citizen Center, the fire department, and across the street from it is the Southern Health Center. So that leaves properties, probably about a couple of acres left, that really is vacant government property, which was set aside many years ago under Public Law 2218 for certain uses, such as the Senior Citizen Center, the fire department, and I believe that was pretty much it. So all it does then is it puts the mayor and the municipal planning council in a position to now be able to be considered for federal grants, to be able to build public facilities. So what the bill does then is it will direct the Director of Land Management to resurvey lot 3620, and in the resurveying, it will sever out the lots that the senior center is located on, and it will sever out the lot that the fire department is on, and so then all the other properties that are then, I guess you could consider excess, will then be turned over under the administrative jurisdiction of the mayor. The funding, now the surveying, of course, will require manpower to go out there and do the surveying. And the funding source then on page 2 on paragraph B there, the bill proposes that the funding for the required survey come from the Host Community Benefits Fund. The villages of Inarahan and Ordot receive annually each $150,000 to each of those two villages. For one, to the village of Ordot for having to put up for 50 years with the stench and the inconvenience of the Ordot dump, and to the village of Inarahan for opening up their backyard for the construction of the Luzon landfill. And so to these two villages then, it was authorized by an earlier law to provide this host community benefits fund to the municipal planning councils in those villages. And so that's where then it is proposed that the funding for the for the required survey be funded. Now, as we go along, Section 3. Yeah. So on Section 3, I would like to make the motion that we delete Section 3 because the appraisal of land, it's not as if we are going to be renting the land for a certain amount of money, nor are we selling it or whatever. We're just simply turning over the jurisdiction of that property to the Inarahan mayor. So we really do not need Section 3, and I move that we delete Section 3 there on page 2.
On the motion to delete, Senator Respicio,
Yeah,
on
thank
the
you.
motion?
Yeah, on the motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also notated some issues with Section 3, but instead of outright deletion, because there's a requirement of statute regarding the appraisals of land, and there's also a standing rule requirement. Instead of deleting it, I was going to move that, notwithstanding the House rules of the 33rd Guam Legislature relative to the appraisals of land, that this shall not apply to this act. And the second thing, I was just going to say that we should do an exemption regarding 2107 of Title 2 GCA relative to the appraisals of land shall not apply to this act, to state that we're aware of this requirement of statute, both in statute and both in our rules, so that if this bill is signed into law, that there's going to be no challenge with respect to another statutory requirement regarding appraisals.
Senator, that's a
So I'll have to withdraw.
that's a long one, so we're going to have to get.
Well,
I know he's going to withdraw his motion, but your amendment that you want to amend. So let me take care of that first, and I'll tell you. So on the motion then to withdraw, to delete Section 3, no objection. Okay, time out. As senators, looking at the time, can we recess? No, because he has a long amendment that we need to have copies of that.
No, it's fast.
Brief recess. We're going to recess until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. No, already because the motion to delete, you're right, to withdraw, that has no objection, and that was ordered already. But then, Senator Respicio, you have an amendment that we don't even have in writing. Okay, we'll do it tomorrow morning at 9. Recess.